Hello, good evening, everybody. We're going to get started with this month's presentation by Barbara, doing Barbara's Pets on pruning.
Okay, a couple guys asked me to do a class on pruning and then they didn't show up, so you guys have to suffer. Okay, I'm gonna go a little slower than I normally do on pruning so you can understand a little better what we're working with. But every pruning cut you make is a wound. The plant has to heal that. And what you have with a branch, you look in the center of this cedar tree, and of course the cedar tree has a deep heartwood. That's the center of the wood, and this is the hardwood and then the bark. So it's the xylem and the phloem. So your phloem is the outside bark that grows with the tree, or it will flake off like our sycamore tree. You'll notice the pattern that the bark gets because the bark can stretch, but it doesn't add to the outside like pines and cedars and other trees that do that. So it peels away. It's called exfoliation. I don't know how many times as a master gardener I got people bringing that in saying, "What's wrong with my tree?" Absolutely nothing. Smooth barks tend to split off, developing another bark underneath it. So it replaces the phloem as it goes. But when you prune, I'm just letting them know, see it at the corner, the cleanest cut you can make. So that determines what tool you'll be using. Now, when a pruning cut is made, the plant will actually compartmentalize that wound away from the rest of the tree. So what happens when you make that cut is it releases a substance called tallow, and that will seal that wood from the inside. Now, in between the xylem and the phloem is a very, very thin layer called cambium. Cambium, when there's a wound, the cambium will start to develop cells, separate and divide, and what it'll do is it will heal the wound if the wound was made properly. And I'm going to show you where some wounds weren't made properly and why it's so critical. So that it calcifies on the outside, so the cambium closes the wound by developing new cells, and you'll see where it just comes together on a proper cut. On an improper cut, that's where we get diseases. The cambium tries to develop that seal, but because it's got to climb up the nub you left to seal, generally disease from moisture and the environment gets in there. So very, very critical making a very clean cut. So this is your physiology of a tree. The xylem, phloem, cambium in between that, and that's all critical. What also happens is the tree seals off the annual rings. Each year a tree ages, it develops a ring. Can't really see it on this one. Well, maybe a little bit, but oops, we're gonna need the broom tonight. As it develops, a new ring is formed every year. So these branches that are on the tree are attached totally into the heartwood. So it's not just attached to the surface, and that's what gives our tree the stability to blow in the wind and to get heavy boughs out there so that it can develop without that. Now, there's a practice that a lot of places use called topping, where they'll take a young tree and cut the top off. What you get at that point, this is unfortunately I didn't have a chance to get native plants because I had to get them all from work. This is a bottle brush. When you make that pruning cut, and it was a very poor pruning cut at that, now I didn't do it. I have a guy that brings in some guys to do work about every 2 months. And then it takes me 6 weeks to fix all their wounds that they do because they don't make proper pruning cuts. They cut it with a chainsaw, like a head shears. They weed whack the grasses. I mean, it's horrible. So what you have here is you can see the growth developed, but these are called epicormic. Epicormic branches are a spontaneous reaction to what the plant puts out, but they're only attached to the surface. So it's okay if it's a young tree that's never going to develop get big branches or anything. But if you let epicormic branches develop and it's somewhere around your house and you get a good windstorm, those branches are coming off because they're not attached to the heartwood. They don't have the strength. So you can look at this. I guess I can pass these around.
That's because they topped it.
They topped it.
That's why.
Wherever there's a pruning cut, and I'll show you the proper pruning cut. Wherever there's a pruning cut, you're going to get the development of shoots below that. These are not your lateral shoots that are natural. These are spontaneous branching, and not good for any tree, actually. You should never top a tree. Plus, most of our trees have what's called a central leader. Even in an oak tree, there's one branch that you'll see in the center top that forms the bough, or the canopy exactly. And pine trees, you have that center one. Now, if something damages that, what happens is these shoots fight for who's going to become the new leader. So if you ever seen a pine tree that had been broken in the top, you'll see a bunch of branches and then one will take off and be dominant. That's what happens. A tree will always have a central leader. But it's still attached on the surface. Unless a lateral bud branch just happened to be up in that area where the damage was, it can actually become the new leader, but the rest of the growth in the top of the tree is going to be epicormic, just attached to the surface. So when making a pruning cut, I had to take this poor. This is a poor wax myrtle, and I had to take it because it shows a lot of poor cuts, disease, weeping, all that stuff that comes with poor cutting. These cuts, see where there was a nub? A nub? And I think this one was a nub, but the nub broke off. And you can see where the cambium tried to form around it. And even up here, you can see where the cambium started to develop and start to close it off. But because the nub was there, and it couldn't outgrow the nub, the disease going into the nub, so that the disease took over. Unfortunately, because that was a branch that was at one time connected to the heartwood, it took that disease right down into the center and it destroyed the whole tree. So diseases are very bad, but you see the discoloration of the bark? That's weeping from the wound. Now, it also has various holes in it, where also when a tree is damaged, it puts out a chemical and it attracts insects. Especially when you get the pine trees, you'll always get the beetles after that, and you always get the woodpeckers. So if you have woodpeckers pecking on your pine tree, chances are that tree has either wire borers or some sort of an insect under the bark. And those woodpeckers will tap on the wood and then listen for activity, and then they'll dig up that part of the wood and eat those bugs. That's how they find it. So this is this has a lot of character to it. Unfortunately, it has some bad pruning cuts. But you can see with holes here, bad cuttings here, and eventually the plant died. Y'all want to pass that around or not? You done? Anyway, you can come up and look at it after class. But if a pruning cut was made properly, I'm going to show you that in a minute. This was a branch, and it had another branch down here that was broken off. So I removed this branch here, that was here, and you can see, and I'm going to let you pass this one around because it's pretty clean, and you can see where the wound healed properly. No nub, no disease. The cambium came in and closed it up. And that's a wax myrtle. That is a native. But when you're taking a branch, well, let me talk about tools first. Now, if you're cutting a branch like this size, your hand clippers are fine. But what you have to remember is when you're cutting that branch off, don't put them on the truck like the branch like this. You want the blade up to the trunk. And what you're going to cut, I don't know which one, this is probably easier to show you. You're going to be looking for two things: a branch bark ridge and a branch collar. Branch bark ridge is very easy to see. It's between two branches, and it'd be a raised area. This would happen to be brown where it's at. The collar is a little swelled area on the bottom. So to take that cut off, blade side towards the tree, so that you can get right up to it, but not flush. You want to cut outside that ridge and that collar, because if you cut flush, you're making 2 wounds on 1 cut. So you want to be outside that, so your cut would be like that. And you can still see the ridge, and you can see swelling on the bottom for the collar. That increases the time that it's not increases, it decreases the time that the cambium can heal. When you make a double cut, it's got to heal 1 wound, then the other wound. So you want to make sure that your cuts are clean, and don't do this. If this was a big branch, that doesn't help you cut. It makes a lot of damage there, and it's ragged. And if a branch should break off, and you make a clean cut, but the cut is not circular-like, take a razor knife and make that wound more circular, because the cambium comes in together. If the cambium has to come in at different angles, it's going to have a harder time sealing. So actually etch out the wound just to the xylem, just taking the phloem off. Okay? Don't cut into the heart. Don't cut into the xylem the hard way. So when you carve your name into a tree, it's not too bad on most trees. You usually go for the bigger trees anyway, but that is still a wound, and it still has to heal. And the healing doesn't take place like in weeks. It takes time to do that. Sometimes a year on big cuts. How many people have had tree people come out and get these big old, like, I can't call them nubs at that point, they're a stump. And they expect that to heal. What will happen is the cambium will form and start to heal, but generally if you look at an old tree that was improperly pruned, you're going to see that disease is set in. Depends on what type of tree, how quickly they respond to a wound. Some trees are more sensitive and are going to die off. Some trees are very tolerable of pruning cuts, so they're going to heal. So you want to make sure that to prevent all this decision making by the tree, just make the proper cut. So now if you're cutting something bigger, you're going to step up 2 loppers. Now these have a pretty good, I think it's a 2-inch, 1 3/4 inch cut. And when you do it, don't cut with the end. Get that tree branch right down to the center, all the way back to the back of the loppers. And don't go slow. If I could. Okay. But where you make that cut's important. I just showed you how to cut. That is not the proper place. You want to cut a tree like that anyway. But I wanted to show you that wood this big or bigger, you're going to have to use loppers. When it gets bigger than that, I love these little saws, but they can hurt you. They're called razor teeth. This is very, very sharp. They do lock in. And this brand makes it so you can't catch your fingers. It stops halfway, and then you're going to cut it, do it again. Some of them go all the way back. And I don't know how many times I've taken that thing down on top of my fingers. So be very, very careful with this. It's called a trigger saw. So when you're going into the wood, you tip it up a little, bring it in, and cut only coming back. So loosen up, cut, loosen up, cut. Now this can cut a branch like that big if your shoulder can hold out. But it's a great little tool, and you can get these almost anywhere. They come bigger. But I like this size because it's easier to carry around in my 5-gallon bucket. That's like tool tote. So see how it locks? You're not going to catch your fingers unless you screw up the second time. But it's telling you, don't put your fingers there. So those are the tools that you want to use. And even with the loppers, make sure the blade is on the side of the trunk, not the other way around, because there's that gap. There's an automatic gap. If this side was against the tree, you automatically got a stub because the cutting blade is on this side. But the other way around, you can cut right up to the collar and the ridge. Okay, so very important how you set your tool up. Take care of your tools, the sharper the better. I put oil on them once a month. I'll clean them off because some of the plants have sap on them. If you don't wash them off after each time, they will discolor because of the chemicals that's in the tree. Make sure that they're out of the weather. Do not try to propagate them by leaving them in the garden. It doesn't work. I don't know how many times I found tools. Oh, darn, now I gotta soak that in oil. But they will rust. They're metal. This is mostly aluminum, but that blade will rust, and some of the other things will rust, especially your spring. And when they get rusty, it's almost impossible to get them to work again. And you can buy them. I know that you can buy them through Felco, but they're not cheap. It's like $12 for a set of 2. So just take them back in out of the weather. Don't even leave them on your porch because the humidity will damage your tools. But take good care of your tools and they'll take good care of you. Okay, very critical to take care of your tools. Okay, so now here's my tree. It's a little sad because it's been cut over there. Okay, this is real straggly down here, and if this was going to be my canopy, I'm going to want to prune all these ones down here. So I take my blade, I put my blade on the side, I cut outside the collar and the ridge. Switch it if you go to the other side. That's where people fail. They just go over here with the same, without turning it. So you got to turn it so that the blade is on the side of the cut of the branch. But you can't turn your tree to do that. You have to walk around the tree. But it's very important to make those nice pruning cuts so that it will heal. Another thing, if you have a young tree and it has branches all the way to the ground, don't take all the branches off the same week. Put like a 3 or 4 week between, because what will happen, these branches have been sort of protecting this bark. And if you take all these branches off and it's exposed to that sun, you're going to get something called sun skull. And it will actually burn all the way down. And it can't heal. It's like a 3rd-degree burn because without grafts, you're not going to heal. And you can graft the tree, but that's a whole other lesson. So now we have a canopy up here and our tree is going to form nicely. Do we have any questions so far?
One of the things on like a bigger tree that you're cutting or have somebody cut a pruning thing on it. What about the painting? Some places say you should put
There's actually, what she's talking about is to prevent insects from going into that wound, which can happen. There's 2 chemicals you can use. You can use a latex paint, and some people will actually paint that around the bottom to keep the bugs won't cross that white. I don't know how true it is. To some degree, it's going to help, but the tree will heal without anything. And then there's the tar-like substance that you buy at a box store and paint that on. It's not necessary, but some people feel like it's for them. They feel better, like they help the tree a lot.
Because I had some pruning done on some of my big oaks, and one of them was this cut that's this big around.
They take some serious branches off of oak trees.
Huge branch off, and I mean it was a lot. It's the perfect cut.
Right.
It's so big, I thought, gosh, I was thinking I should paint it or put something on it.
You can actually spray it with an insecticide too, that will help. But like I said, the tree, if properly pruned, is going to heal itself. Now let's pretend that this is a giant branch and it's attached over here at the trunk. What's the proper way to take that off? And you'll see even tree guys do this. They may take the weight off, but they won't take off for the weight of this, and they'll start cutting.
Oh.
And then what happens is the weight of the tree starts to bring it down, and if you didn't do the undercut, then it's going to literally strip that bark off the trunk, and that's an additional wound, and a lot of times cannot heal, especially on peely barks like the cedars. And that cedar tree that's on my truck out there was torn out of the top of a tree this last weekend when that storm came through Crystal River. So what you want to do is do a 3-cut. You want to do an undercut, usually about anywhere from 14 inches to 20 inches from the big trunk of your tree. You do an undercut. And that, depending on the size of the branch, if the branch is like that big, I do an undercut about like that. Then you want to come out here and do the second cut and take that weight off. Then you go in to make that cut, therefore you've eliminated all that weight. And when you're cutting, it's not going to split out of there. So bigger the trunk, the deeper the undercut to prevent that stripping out of the trunk. So that's called a 3-cut. Very, very popular, but you'd be surprised how many trees guys don't do it. They just take their chainsaw up there and they're super tree guy, super squirrel. Okay, is there any questions on any of that? Everybody understands how to make a pruning cut.
What about fruit trees?
What, fruit trees?
Fruit trees. My peaches are
Peaches.
starting to bloom. And
Okay, wait a minute, let me cover one thing before I answer that. When you're gonna take a branch off, the other thing you don't do is you don't take a branch off here. A branch has to go off to a trunk area. So it would be there. Because what's gonna happen with that is, I guess it's out there, the little bottle brush that had the epicoric shoots, that's what you're gonna get is epicoric shoots. Now on a peach tree, any fruit trees, peaches, nectarines, I don't know what other, plums, they get big whips. And then when the fruit comes, those whips, the fruit goes right down on the ground and then you get damaged fruit. Or the rats get it, the fruit rats will get it because it's right there in front of them, so they're gonna eat it. So what you wanna do is select the branches you wanna take them back out and take them all the way back to the trunk wood.
even like 8-foot branches?
Yep,
Oh.
but don't cut just one cut, do the 3-cut. I don't know how heavy that branch is, but it'd be better to do a 3-cut, it'd be easier for you to handle.
Broom handle size. They're
Okay, take off the end. You may not have to do the undercut, but take off the weight and then hold it and make the final cut. Because you're looking at fruit trees that are what, that big, a little bigger?
the biggest ones, I mean, branches are probably about as big as.
Because they're whips, because they're,
Broom handle or-
but the tighter you can get your tree, the more fruit you're gonna get because you're gonna get more tips.
Okay.
So every time a tip grows out, that's gonna be a place for a flower for fruit. So you do wanna prune your trees, but you don't wanna do them now. Because they're gonna be setting flower in the spring.
I'm waiting for it to turn cold and they just started blooming this week. That's.
Yeah, and a lot of fruit trees, especially if you get into the apples and some of the other fruit, they need that chill hours. And it's not like our chill hours. It'll come on the label or you can look it up, but they need so many chill hours, and that's why apples don't do well down here. Dorset, Anna, do you know of any other?
The only one we carry the Anna and Dorset.
Yeah, and they have to cross-pollinate. So you need 2 trees. A lot of people do an Anna and a Dorset because they can cross-pollinate with the 2 of them. Some of your peaches, some of your other fruit trees do need a cross-pollinating. They'll say self-pollinating, that means they only need 1 tree. So when you're looking at fruit trees, it's a little different story. Generally, you want to do their pruning after the fruit is pulled off. However, if you have damaged branches right now, you can go ahead and prune them because they're not going to produce good fruit anyway.
What about shrubs like beautyberries and coral beans, you know, they're sort of deciduous and they
Right.
they lose all their branches and then you want to get them small for next year. So
The ones around my house, I cut my beautyberries right to the ground because I'm in shade and mine get about 12 foot tall. So after the birds eat all the fruit for the season, I do prune those back and I take them all the way to the ground. Now, the ones further out, I just let them do their thing. I don't prune them. The Cherokee bean or the coral bean, prune those, but go back. If you're going to take a branch out, at least go back to an existing branch.
So just like a tree.
Right, just like a tree, but on a smaller scale.
Even though they're multi-branch.
And look out for thorns, because they have nasty thorns. So, yeah, know your tree before you go in there with the pruners. And that particular plant that he's talking about, the thorns are like cat claws. You don't feel them going in, but when you come out, they'll rip you up. There's a number of trees like that. Wait a minute, what's it?
Different types of fruit, though, don't you have to know what they bloom, what they grow the fruit on, old growth?
Right, you need to know whether they're, this year's branching or next year's branching. That's another thing. And in flowering, like the oak leaf hydrangea, they only bloom on the tips, but they set the bud early, so they set the bud during the summertime. So the best rule of thumb on any fruiting plant, whether it's a fruit tree or a flowering plant, after the flower fades, if you're not waiting on fruit. If you're waiting on fruit, after the fruit is pulled off to eat, you cut them then. Because that's when they're gonna heal the quickest. Most plants heal during the spring because they're coming out of that semi-dormancy that they're in, and then they kickstart for the spring. But a lot of times you're putting out flowers and fruit or seed, and you don't want to really cut them then, so after that. But going into a summer drought, if we think we're gonna have a hot summer, do very little pruning.
I see some of these blueberry fields that I talk about, you have to know what you trim on them, you take the old or the new, because he gives them a pretty good.
Yeah, and those get cut pretty good. They get almost rejuvenated, and a rejuvenation is where you take all the older growth off and give the plant a new start. But the cut has to still be proper.
You go all the way to the base, or then?
Well, you bring it back to a trunk.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go back to the main trunk, like on this. You can bring it back to here. But it's back to a trunk. It's not cut up here where you're gonna get epicorial shoots. Cutting in heel, proper cut, cutting in here, proper cut, that will heal. You don't want to take the center leader out though. But you can thin it out. I know a lot of young oak trees, they make a healthy, because they're gonna abort those branches anyway. So if you can thin out those branches while you can stand and cut it, get that center, open that center up. Opening the center up gives it more air, more circulation, less insects, less disease, and less cutting your hand when you're going in to make the pruning cut later. So those little ones that are aborted, they become very stiff, almost, they act like thorns. You can tear yourself up pretty good with them. Any more questions? Okay, yes?
With an elm tree, would you,
Regular elm or a weeping elm? How do you cut it with it? Which one? Drake elm? Well, there's a Drake weeper too. If it's a weeper, you want to make sure that you don't do an epicorial shoot. Don't cut it through the trunk. So still bring it back to the existing branch. But step back and look at it. Don't do all your pruning when you're right here, because you can't see the plant exactly what it needs to look like. Do a few pruning cuts, step back, take an overview, and you know where to go from there. I would thin out the center a little bit, yeah, because they can get various insects that come in there. Not as much as some of the other plants, but almost every plant has some sort of insect. Some more so than others, especially flowering plants. So you get almost everybody eating on them. Okay, any more questions? Go ahead.
White blueberry, how do you propagate it?
By seed.
What's that?
Seed or cutting.
I thought it was sterile.
No, I got sprouts up.
No, you can get it in germinate. And not, you don't get like 70–80%, but you can get them to germinate. Now, do they need to be refrigerated? Take the seed off the refrigerator, go straight in?
the fruit, smushed it on a pot, and they sprout.
There you go. Abuse it. All right, if there's no more questions, then that's it.
So we'll take about a 15-minute break. There's some plants on the plant table if you want to see what's available, and I think there's a sign-up sheet. And oh yeah, you can talk to win back tickets, and we'll get to business in a minute.
Well, if you don't do that undercut, what'll happen?
Okay, so we are short a president and a secretary still, so I'm not the president, but I'll give a few announcements. On January 8th, we have a light walk, the seven chief back there, right? Or Ben has it, so talk to Ben. I forgot to bring my sign-up sheet, but on the 11th, we have the second Tuesday survey at the City Forest, so come see me if you want to, or anybody at home. Oops. Anybody at home, you can email the chapter. On the 24th, I'm doing a presentation at the Central Ridge Library, Native for Newbies. So if anybody wants to come see that, you're welcome to do that. That's at 1 p.m. And then, because we don't have a president, I'm now in charge of booking speakers. So we now have an official speakers committee. So if anybody has great ideas about people who come speak to the chapter, email me, email the chapter, whoever, and you can join our little unofficial speakers committee. And then, does anybody else have any business they want to discuss?
What was the day that Natives for Newbies was?
It's January 24th at 1 p.m.
Where?
At the Central Ridge Library, in Beverly Hills.
Yep.
Okay, what's up? Okay,
The Liking Walk, when is that?
the Liking Walk is on the 8th at 9 a.m.
It's this Saturday.
Yeah, this Saturday. Okay, so now we can get down to our official business of the night, which is our speaker. January is the month of Florida Art Day, so the Florida state tree is the cabbage and sable palm. And in that spirit, we are fortunate to have tonight Jason Aguilar of Anson Nursery, and he will discuss Florida's palm trees and their care. Jason, oh, dang it. Okay, so our speaker tonight is Jason from Anson Nursery, and Jason has a what type of degree? Okay, see, I don't know anything about degrees, so I didn't know what an AA degree was. Okay, so an AA degree in horticulture and landscape design. He became a landscaper in 2007 and purchased Anson Nursery in 2016, and then shortly thereafter became a member of the Citrus chapter and created a native section within Anson Nursery for all of us to come shop at. So we thank you, and if you'd like to come on up, we'll have you talk tonight.
Thank you. I'm gonna take the clicker. So bear with me, this is only gonna take a couple hours. So I'm Jason. I appreciate you guys having me, especially for your first one. That's nice. And today we're going to talk about some Florida native palms, kind of go over, not getting really deep down into the nerdy stuff, but try to make it fun and and learn at the same time. So Florida native palms. So I got a quick question. Hey, so I got a question. So are palms monocot or dicot? Does anybody know? Monocots, right? The reason I put this on is it's an interesting fact. A lot of people, we get a lot of traffic at the nursery, and you'd be surprised what kind of people ask questions and things. The dicots have the 2 seed leaf, multi-branched. They have normally a tap root, and the monocots are a single seed leaf, and the not normally, but a fibrous root system. So with the palm being in the monocot class, this includes the grasses, lilies, and irises, orchids, and others. And to think that a 100-foot tall palm tree is in the grass family, to me it's pretty cool. You wouldn't think that you think it would be like an oak or something in the same family, but the new seed leaves even look like a blade of grass. We pull them out all the time at the nursery. The mow over them. But if you guys have been to the nursery, you'll notice like these sables right here. Because the diameter of the trunk here is 12 inches, 18 inches, that root ball is only, say, 24 inches in diameter and deep. If this was a normal tree, like an oak or a maple, with that size diameter, it'd be a disaster. It wouldn't, there's just no way that would live. But because of the fibrous root system on these palms, they can withstand, that perfect. And then with the hurricane cut as well to kind of balance out the stress on those. So like I said, palms referred to as trees, but in fact, they're closer to a grass. I just like that. I kind of stick with that. So today I went online and there was a couple different, some said 11, some said 12 varieties of palms. I stuck with 12, even number. But we've got 1 through 12 here: the Protus, the Key Thatch, Miami Scrub, Dwarf Palmetto, Buccaneer, Needle Palm Cabbage, Royal Silver, Thatch, and Saw Palmettos. The ones in the green are going to be good for our area. These are some of the ones that can take the cold that we have. The ones in the red are going to be more threatened or rare, endangered, and the black are just, they're good to go. There's nothing really going on with them. Protus palm. There's a few of them here in Crystal River that I've seen. They in the landscape. They got a very vertical growth to them. They're a clustered palm. They're not very salt tolerant, and they will show some damage with our normal winters. But really a cool corner piece for focal point in the landscape. Makes nice for underplantings for some flowers and things. But this is the Protus palm or Everglades palm. Key Thatch. I've seen 1 or 2 of these ever down south. Not too familiar, but these are very slow grower, very small diameter. Again, small focal points in the landscape, and these are going to be native to the Florida Keys, and very slow. Let's see, this one here is, yeah. So the silver and the green on the bottom fronds. It's got like a two-tone. Miami palm, to me, looks like a young sable palm, or which is in the same family, but young, like a saw palmetto, found in Miami-Dade. I included these part of the 12, very rare or extinct, and it's one of those that I've never seen this one before, or even knew about. Really, kind of a cool one. Yeah, it was like endangered, or yeah, it was like an and or kind of. Honestly, when I was putting this together, these kind of blur. It's like once you see the color blue, they all look blue. So these all look like saw palmettos. Scrub palm, again, 6 foot tall and wide. It is more of an understory, not salt tolerant, and has an underground trunk. I've seen these from the underground trunk and an above ground trunk on these. Did I put you to sleep? I apologize. Yes. Dwarf palmettos, the sable miners. A lot of your commercial landscaping companies, your architects, are specking the miners. They're a little different, but they're very slow. They're cool. You can definitely tell the difference between, if you put this one right next to a regular sable, you can definitely tell the difference. Really a cool palm. We don't carry these at the nursery. I'd like to, but very, very, very neat, very cold hardy as well. Buccaneer palm, very south. When you see these smooth trunks like this, those are pretty much self-sheathing, self-cleaning palms. Not a whole lot. You can almost tug on the branch when it's ready to go, and it'll just clean right up. But this is very, very far south from us, Miami-Dade areas. The seed pods are attractive on these. And they're going to have like this, almost like a mule palm or a pindo palm kind of growth, as far as the canopy goes, but obviously not as cold hardy. They're very slow. You're lucky to get one from here. Oh, yeah, for sure. Needle palm, Dark green, very drought tolerant. We use these in the landscape here locally. It works. They work out. They work out fairly well in certain applications. They are cold hardy. I actually brought one here as a sample. They do have needles, and they are very long. They're very pointy, and they will get you. They don't mess around. But they're a cool palm. They're great, cold hardy, very very low maintenance. You would trim them no different than a saw palmetto or any kind of other palm. Just be careful for those thorns. Yeah, I'd imagine. I've never seen one that big, but I'm sure. I'm sure. Nice, nice. Yeah, bring me some seeds. Uh, geez. Yes, ma'am. We do. Yes, ma'am. Yep, yep, yep. Yep, we do. Yeah, I think they're in 7 gallons, and I'm not sure the price on them. Maybe 40 or $50 probably.
Even though they have thorns, you can plant them in your garden without hitting them, because the fronds fold out and the needles are actually straight up against the palm.
Correct. Yeah, the needles are vertical. Maybe yeah, they're pretty vertical. They're if you're careful, they're easy to move. And you guys, I mean, like you said, after you guys can have all at it and touch all over it if you like. No, the cabbage. No, the cabbage palm, saw palm, or the sable palm, excuse me. It's our official state tree. These are the ones that when you're down at Ozello or Homosassa and you look up into the clouds and you see them touching the clouds, that's these guys. Very, very slow growers. Once they get to that, they can still put on a foot plus a year depending on the location and how happy they are. But very salt tolerant. The heart of the palm salad. I've only had it one time. It's not. It's pretty gross. But you're killing a palm for it. It's just not my thing. But back in the day, it was a popular thing to do. But yeah, tasted not maybe they didn't cook it proper. I don't know, but needed more salt or something. But these are very cold hardy, very common. We use these a lot in the landscape. This by far, out of all the palms, are going to be your most economical price point palm. We sell them at the nursery. They're 10, 12, 15 foot tall of CT clear trunk, which is a pretty good size. And you won't see these in pot. Well, they're getting more popular in pots, but most of these are going to be B&B or bald and burlap.
Is it true you can bury that one deep?
Oh yeah, you can bury this. Yeah, you can bury this guy. I mean, yes, for sure. I was on a project. Guy was building a home and right on the river, and he buried his palm. He had one because he had to go up the grade for flood whatever. And I bet you it was every bit of 10 foot. He buried that thing, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. You did it to an oak. If you did a foot on an oak, I mean, I'd be stressing. Yeah, that'd be a bad day. Yes, ma'am.
So these things are harvested from the wild, right?
Yes, ma'am.
There's no nursery grown.
Well, no, man. Well, what they do is, so most of the time, like let's say like the villages just bought 1,000 or have 1,000 acres, and instead of clearing out the acre, they'll have a contractor that harvests the palms, and they'll pay the landowner X amount for the palms, and they'll harvest those palms out of that property, and they're properly done. There may be some nurseries that are replanting them, but most of the time this is found in wooded areas or undeveloped areas to where they've got permission or should have permission to dig. Right. So I mean, for a palm, let's just say the small group in the bottom. Let's just say those are 10 or 12 foot palms. That would cost you $150 for that palm tree. If you were to grow a seed and get it to that tall, that would be a rough go for that money. I mean, you're better off just picking one up already done for you. Yes, ma'am.
Well, we were seeing a lot in Southwest Florida, though, is that these palms were getting taken from pastures. I mean, the farmers are selling them.
Sure.
Okay. They're selling them, but they're actually taking them from the wild, and it was really a lot of, down there was a lot of habitat destruction.
And then you're gonna find that with a lot of plant. If there's any value to anything that people can access, they're gonna go. I mean, I've seen these being dug up. You've got people trespassing for the saw palmetto berries. You see people trespassing for Krista River on 19. They cleared out a path for that road, and I drove by, and believe it or not, I saw some native coonties, which we'll get to that later. And a couple weeks later, whether they got plowed over, or somebody dug them up and took them. So people, that's just the nature, but where we get them from, they've all been properly harvested from the location.
Our local bats use those to live in.
Yeah, you keep them like that. All kinds of stuff for sure. Royal palm, you see these guys down south. Another self-cleaning palm, very, very beautiful palm, very smooth trunked. We get a lot of calls for palms like this at the nursery because when people think of palms, that's what they kind of think of. They think of this smooth trunk, beautiful top. They see these palm pictures, but in reality, we're way far north for those. And but again, very, very pretty palm, self-cleaning. That whole sheet, that whole green section is attached. The bottom of that all the way to the top of the frond. It'll just peel right off. Very, very showy. Silver palm, not too familiar with this guy, but it says grows up to 15 feet. It does have a green and silver foliage to it, and this is another South Florida palm. To me, it resembles another thatch palm, but yeah, of this. Of the correct. Nice. Yeah, I've never come across one. I'd like to go over there and see it. I've never seen it. That'd be neat. A lot of these information and stuff is coming from through IFAS and through the FNPS and things. Thatch palm, same thing. It looks very similar. This has got a little bit, the fronds are a little more, kind of weepy, but I tend to like the palms that have a little bit thinner trunk. In the landscape, sometimes proportionally correct with other things around it look nice, as opposed to something that's so big and girthy that you really have to bring the bed out to plant to kind of compensate for that. These look very nice narrow palms that you can put in tight areas and still get the height that you're looking for. Not too familiar. This one says it's endangered, but definitely very interesting. And if any of you guys have these at the house, or this one is, but I'd like to see some. I'd like to, this, no, for sure. But I'd like to see that. Right. Super slow grower. Salt palmetto, everybody's favorite. Low growing bush palm, habitat for all kinds of animals and critters. It grows all through Florida. Got a buddy who does the honey, does the pollen for the honey, and the berries, like I said earlier, are used for urinary or prostate and medicinal. And there's actually, you can collect these berries and they'll sell them by the pound. There's places you see a sign written in paint, berries. We buy berries on the side of the road, and they'll give you the cash right there on the spot. And trucks of them, right. And in high school there was a group of guys that they made that was kind of like their fun money. They would do that, and but not very legal. You can definitely get in trouble by doing that unless it's on your property. They're finishing up now. That your pick was probably about a month or two ago. Longer. Exactly.
And right now, anyone who sells berries, even on your own property, you have to get a permit.
Oh, is it? Wow. Okay.
You're supposed to have a permit.
Wow. I guess.
But you can let people come in and take it free.
No. Well, yeah, I guess you could if you made no profit, but then if they sold them, they would have to have a permit.
Yeah. Well,
They have all sorts of problems with these guys going on public
Yeah, they go on all kinds of properties.
So you'll see. So if you go down Citrus Ave, there's a huge saw palmetto field that's planted out, and you'll see some beehives and things like that over there as well. And there's been times where these guys are in mid swing where there are people monitoring, and you could see the ATVs driving through, because people will just pull off the side of the road and they'll load up a trash bag in no time. And a trash bag could bring you 50 or 60 bucks. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but every penny counts, I guess. But yeah, this is becoming more and more. You'll see them. The hotel or the motel over there in Homosassa normally has, not to call them out, but people stay there, and you'll see the little white bins, and they weigh them, and they'll give you the cash, and okay. So the Kunti, it's obviously a cycad. Out of habit, we called it a Kunti palm. But this is one of the oldest groups of palms cycads dating back millions of years. This is a great shrub that we use in the landscape. We use it a lot of times to naturalized areas and native areas. It's just a good overall texture that is not like a whole lot of others that we have. We have the cardboard palm and the sago. But as far as a true Florida, a cycad native, the Kunti is going to be a good one for you. Like I said, great in the landscape. The berries are really, really pretty. The seeds, I've seen almost a rainbow of colors through them all, and very, very nice, very easy to grow. But yeah, and I think you brought last year. I think was it you that brought the thin leaf and the broadleaf Kunti? Was it?
I've had both.
Yeah.
We have the one that's native around here is the thin leaf one. You get the East Coast black area, you get the broadleaf one.
Yeah, this one, the ones that we're going to carry are just there's the broadleaf is going to be more commercially, more nursery produced. I have seen the narrow leaf, but on occasion we get a mix. Sometimes we'll get them mixed in. But they don't, but they're a great landscape palm.
The Italian butterfly that they're, what are they, host
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Here, it's not found up here? No, so you can't.
The range of that butterfly is very restricted to South Florida. So I mean, with global warming maybe, but they also host Isle butterflies.
Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen them with. Oh yeah, they'll like. Yeah, you touch those, you'll know for sure. They'll light you up. They're pretty rough. Basic palm diagram. So you have your flag on top, your new growth, your canopy, your seed pods, your trunk. Now, this is a very general way. It's not technical. People ask me, how old is my palm? With a palm, the palm shows its age in theory on the outside instead of like the oak or like what Miss McCormick brought in, where the rings are on the inside. With this palm, it shows it on the outside. And a lot of times you can gauge, not technical, not scientific by no means, but it just kind of gives you a fun, thing to figure out. Personally, I measure, after about 3 foot, I measure a foot, and that's my year mark for me. On some palms, other palms, obviously a trunkless palm or a sub trunk, you're not going to be able to see. But now the diameter changes on the trunk itself. So when you see a trunk that goes from say 12 inches, and all of a sudden you see like a bulge, and then it's 15 inches all the way up. Those are cool because those are timelines that at that year, whatever year that was, where it bulged out, was either a good fertilizer year for that palm or a wet, rainy season, whatever the palm liked. If you go to Withlacoochee River, the power place where you pay your bills and stuff, they have sable palms all over there. Now, I just drove by there today, and they trimmed them up way too much, but that's beside the point. But you can see, if you count it all, like a half a dozen or a dozen of these sables, every one of them has that same bulge or that same growth pattern, which whatever year that was, it matches up to all of them. It's just kind of a cool thing because the palms really show or tell a story on the outside, whereas a lot of your other trees, you have to cut into them. It's just kind of a neat thing. Next time you drive around, you can kind of you'll see that. So pruning a palm, very simple. You can use the same tools and equipment that Ms. McCormick had mentioned. We use a Sawzall on certain palms, but we use a metal blade, which has smaller teeth. We don't use a wood blade. Wood blade, we just shred everything up, especially if you were going to do a diamond cut or some kind of fancy step cut on certain palms. I would definitely recommend, if you're going to use a power tool, go with a metal blade or a handsaw or a regular pruning shears. But I like to trim them where, me personally, I like them when they're flat, straight across, a 90 degree. This right here on certain palms, that's way too much for me. This guy right here, that canary, it looks good, I guess. But what the problem is you got these 15-foot fronds supporting this. That's a ton of stress. And, where there's stress, there's secondary infections and there's a ton of, that is not healthy. Whoever trimmed that palm, and I'll get to this later, the reason why they trimmed it that high was because there was a deficiency or something not right with that palm. That palm should never have been trimmed like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. These should have never been taken off. But you see that all over here. It's popular because right now, like I said, I just drove by the sable palms over at the rec center, and they're all at least a 45-degree angle or even higher. Hurricane cut. The only time we get the hurricane cuts are going to be on our sables, or if we bring in the rare case, we bring in some Bismarck palms, which are not natives, but we'll bring in some Bismarcks for some of the coastal areas. We'll hurricane cut those because of the transplant and the overall transporting and the wind burn and all this stuff just makes it really well. But I would never hurricane cut in preparation for a hurricane. That's not, I would not recommend any of that. Let's see if I'm missing anything. So when you're trimming up a palm, if you look at this picture right here, this is probably 3 to 4 feet, maybe 5 feet, but what you're going to find is as you go higher on the trunk, the boots on, say, your sable palm here, as you go higher on the trunk, you're going to see that those boots are harder and harder to get off. On an older palm, I would leave at the very, very least 2 foot of those boots on. Now, that's on sables. There are other palms like Sylvesters and things that doesn't apply, but on ones that the boots that aren't self-cleaning, I would definitely leave that for protection. It just makes for a healthier palm. And again, for me, cut your dead hangers 90 degree and just call it a day. Don't get up in this. Your palm's gonna stress.
What causes a sable palm? When I have to take the boots off, it's like razor knife or whatever to cut them off. But then another palm 5 feet away, the whole trunk will just fall out.
I've seen palms, like I said, we have a cluster of 3 at the nursery. One of them starts falling like midway. Yeah. It's loose, and then palm variation. I'm sure there's probably some technical reason, but what we do with those, if you want those cleaned up, we don't do it personally, but I know guys who do. They'll take a chainsaw, they'll put the blade right next to the trunk vertical, and they'll start at the bottom, and they'll just shave right up, just ride the trunk, and then they'll cuts off pretty clean. The Canary Island date palm as well. That palm, you don't have to have it 4 foot in diameter. That palm has got probably a good foot of just branches that could be cut a lot cleaner if you wanted that look. But yes, pruning a palm, yeah, try to avoid that last. Now, palms and diseases and issues, lethal bronzing obviously is a big topic. It is a bacteria, and it's caused by this little guy right here, little plant hopper. It's crazy how to think this little guy right there will damage a palm like this. My kids go to the rock crusher school. As I'm driving through the pickup line, there's probably a couple dozen over the course of 3 years of me going there. And you can spot it. When you start seeing your sable palms start to not even turn brown, but you'll see the separation where the flag's still holding strong, but you see how the flag is right here, the still growth, and you got these kind of 45s holding strong. Well, these 45s will start sagging, and you'll have a little gap, and it's just not normal. I've watched them for years over there, just one after another die. I've mentioned it, but life happens and people, it goes on. But it's a shame. The fields that we get them from are supposed to be, or they're supposed to be pre-treated. But if you do see one, instead of saying you see it, make sure you get a professional out there from the extension office or something that kind of to make sure that it is what it is. It could be something. It could be a nutrient deficiency, and mistaken in getting rid of a good palm. But if it is confirmed, you definitely remove it, get rid of it. It can't affect others around it. It literally just bounces from one to another. And hopefully one day, this little guy right here will move on and die or something. So the antibiotics, it's a pre-treatment, and I was reading on it. They say to do it every quarter, and it's a big long word. I can tell you at the end of the class. I can pull it up. But basically, it helps, and it because this affects the phloem tissue. What this antibiotic does is it kind of beefs up that, to my knowledge, and it kind of aids in the saliva as this guy's chewing and doing his thing. It kind of aids in the bacteria getting infected into it. But there's also another one that looks like lethal bronzing. It's come from Texas, coming over as well. But I only picked a handful to kind of go over. Another common one that we see around here is the palm disease, or bud rot, which is simply Phytophthora. Very common in the landscape. Unfortunately, when you have bud rot, if you don't catch it in time, that palm is done. It's not going to recover. I have in rare cases seen it recover where I thought it was done and it coming out, but a lot of times when you see that early signs of that gray, like we were talking about, that gray new growth, that's a sign of something's not right. Now, if you see this red, like this red brownish kind of soaking area right here, or you see a palm frond just out of the center just flop over to the side, those are early signs that bud is too wet, and it's just not happy. There's the secondary or fungal infection going on. Bud rot's really common. At the nursery, because we do overhead watering on everything, my philosophy at the nursery is it's shotgun approach. Everything gets everything. So there's really no special treatment. So unfortunately, you may have palms that don't require daily watering, but they get daily watering. And bud rot is something that, and it's a mechanical damage basically from us. But very common. It can be treated. Phytophthora is very simple. It goes through plants and other things as well. Clean your equipment. If you're going to prune those, definitely clean them. They can be transplanted with a solution of bleach and water. Leaf spot. This is probably our number one phone call or questions when I'm out in the field. This is such a common leaf spot. Not saying it's right, but it's a very common leaf spot. and it's probably on this guy here, very easy to take care of. To my knowledge, not lethal. It's more of an aesthetic issue. A lot of times you'll find it on the lower or the older fronds, excuse me, and the easily controlled by a fungicide. But you'll see this pretty common. If you go to the nursery or other nurseries or even out in the wild, you'll see this water soaked area with like a gray center, brown center. It's like a a red, sometimes even a streaking effect. But most of the time, it's going to be these spots, and they'll combine.
So once you have that and treated, then you cut off the old fronds.
Yeah, I would cut off the old infected fronds. Now, I mean, it's not to me. To me, if this was my palm tree and I saw it and it had spot and it was a beautiful green foliage frond, I would not cut the frond because of this because of the spot. The frond is actually more beneficial to the palm to keep than to just cut it off because you see this. It's more beneficial to keep. Now, if that palm, if the frond is just inundated, it just is nasty, and you have to get rid, obviously cut it off. But I would do a systemic and a contact. I would do a combo with a fungicide, and that should stop it. And treat it every 7 to 14 days or whatever the label tells you to do. But yeah, try to keep your fronds on the palm. You don't want to just cut them all off. It's beneficial to keep them on as long as possible. So palm pests. So I did a quick list of just the most basic, well-known. Obviously, you have this one up top here. This is spider mites. Spider mites are not going to occur normally outside in the landscape here. This is more common if you have a potted palm in your house, or if you had a potted palm on the lanai or the porch, or even outside in an area where there's not a lot of airflow or so, or just a really dry area. You may see some of this spider webbing effect, and you'll get this real penciling and stenciling, yellow spots. It can be treated with a miticide, but that aesthetically you can see that one. That one's not very common in the landscape. Now this one, on the other hand, here, this is Asian cycad scale. This is a sago, but on the underside of the leaf, these are tiny little bugs just chewing away, reaping havoc on that palm or cycad. And at this point, whole other conversation, but you can literally just trim all the fronds off, do a hard systemic insecticide drench repeatedly, and hope for the best that the new growth will come out clean. A lot of this stuff will live in the deepest crevices of that palm and in the ground. And then if your neighbor has this, it's just going to just bounce right over to you, but it can be controlled with a little effort. This next one here is some mealybugs. Again, I would put this one in the same category as your spider mites as location. A lot of times your mealybugs are going to come in where maybe the palm is in a too shady of an area, or it's in the lanai or screen enclosed, or in a house, or understory under another shrub or tree. This one here, the mealybugs, very easy to take care of. Again, I would just hit it with I'm a big systemic insecticide person, so I would go with a systemic insecticide on those. This little guy right here, he's a pain. He's going to cause your lethal death on sable palms. This cool guy here, tortoise, the tortoise beetle. Pretty cool, pretty neat. He'll bounce around and chomp and chew. It looks pretty cool. I've never seen one in person, but I'd like to. It is kind of cool. This guy right here, these weevils come in all different shapes, colors, sizes, and I have seen those. I was in North Florida at a sable palm harvesting area, and there was just sable palms just laid out where we had one guy digging them out, one person using these cool tools to clean them. it was a cool process. But I tell you what, you had these guys everywhere. And the thing is that, whether people like to hear or not, they're everywhere, literally. You can put a systemic insecticide on them, but a lot of your palms will tolerate, in my personal opinion, will tolerate them to an extent. But these guys are just like the spider mites and the mealybugs. They're your neighbor. They just fly and they bounce around everywhere. But these are some of the most common problems as far as pests go that we have with the palms.
Now the weevil, doesn't he bore into the bud?
He'll bore right in. Yep, he'll bore right in, and then just make tunnels. We used to bring in Canary Island date palms, very beautiful, trimmed up, very nice. And we had a huge issue with transplanting in them on the project, and they would just die. We would leave them tied up. We would give them Super Thrive. We would give them all kinds of stuff, and they would just stress. And we ended up this is going back a couple of years ago. We ended up taking a chainsaw and literally just slicing it like a banana. And when a palm stresses, this stuff, these bugs are smart. They know when the palm stress, they just have at it, And we found all kinds of grubs the size of, just huge, just getting in there. And unfortunately, with a palm tree, the problem with the palm is that when you realize there's a problem, most of the time it's too late. You're months behind the game, unfortunately. The only real good thing is to try to do a preventative maintenance, but that takes a structure, to be there, every quarter or every 3 months to apply some of this stuff. So I'm gonna go through some quick palm deficiencies. Really simple. Potassium is one of the number one palm deficiencies, in my opinion. This affects the overall quality of the quantity of the green fronds. That picture of that one over pruned canary on the bottom, a few slides back. To me, if that had a potassium deficiency, that's why they trimmed it so high. Because if you see this guy, now this is a very distorted, this top should be a lot bigger, but if you see the green, somebody trimmed it not knowing, they just trimmed it to the green. This right, same way. This is all the lower fronds, the older fronds are going to be your brown, your top frond is going to be normally green. Same thing, bottom fronds yellowing earlier than normal, and this is very common as well. People trim palms thinking they're doing the right thing. They're trimming them because they say, okay, it's time to trim. These fronds are turning yellow. I got new flags coming. I got new growth coming. And that may be true, but in a lot of instances, it's simply a deficiency. And if you're trimming a palm and you start getting into that 45-degree or higher area, that's a no trim zone for me. Anything higher than that 45 is a no-go. Now, the palms at the nursery, these palms have been dug out of the ground and living in black bags. They don't want to be in these black bags. It's very hard to regulate the moisture level from the sun and everything. So the brown fronds that you may see at the nursery is not so much a deficiency as it is just overall stress. So some of these symptoms can bleed through. So if you see your palm doing this, it's not necessarily a potassium deficiency. It could be other things, but it would never hurt to all your palms, load down the potassium. Would never hurt. The other one that I see a lot of is manganese deficiency. I see a lot of this on your sago palms. If you ever have a sago, does anybody have sagos in here? So your sago palm, you have your new growth coming out. All of a sudden, it's really stunted and really brown, and it looks like somebody took a torch to it and burned it. Very deformed. If you have that, that is a manganese deficiency. Very, very common. And on extreme cases, you'll get this frizzle top, or this burnt look, this is really just nasty new growth coming through here. And that's just a, a nutrition issue. In most cases, it'll grow out. There's another one, boron deficiency, where it looks very similar, but it'll start growing off to the side and get all distorted. But if you see those early signs, you can even notice this on the fruit or the bloom panicle. You'll see the same thing. If it's just gnarled up, witch broom, very stumpy, just not growing properly, that's another issue. The other thing is, let me back up. Let's see, I'm going to go that far back. So when you see a palm in general, a nice healthy palm should have, now I'm not using this as a healthy palm, but should have a nice arch to the whole look of the palm. Okay, that means the new flags coming up are nice and healthy, and they're going to drop and take place, and the old fronds will eventually die. What happens is that early signs, see it all over the place, early signs of either malnourished palms or deficiencies in some way or manner or bugs is when you get this like a flat top. When you start seeing the new fronds opening up and it's really short, that's an early, even though they may be green and just as pretty as can be, but if they're dwarfed or they're small and they're opening up really young, that is definitely a nutrition deficiency in most cases, and can be easily treated with some fertilizer. So you want to make sure that your palm has this nice arch where that center flag or that center bud is the tallest point of your whole palm. If you have that, you have a pretty healthy palm. One more thing. If the center of this bud dies, okay, what I was telling you, the couple here, I've seen palms look green and beautiful for months and tell the homeowner that this palm is dead. The center, there's no center. The center is rotted out. I pulled it out. It's got a stench to it, just nasty. It's done. But that palm, I've seen them still green for months. And then all of a sudden one day you'll wake up and you'll just be like flat. It'll just go overnight. So definitely on a palm, that center bud is the main gauge on how healthy your palm is doing.
I also start to get a good odor to them too.
Oh yeah. No, that's great. Fertilizer, we keep it simple. We go down the street here to Site One Landscape Supply, and we pick up Lesco 8212. Anybody can pick it up. It's what we use at the nursery. We fertilize every quarter. We put it on the calendar, and we have an employee to go out there and fertilize the balled and burlapped the B&B palms with it. And we do all granular. We never do any liquids. We never put it down the center of the palm. I see that. And let's see. Because of the fibrous roots, you're wasting your fertilizer if you're putting it on the leaf's edge or the frond's edge on most palms, especially something with a long canopy or a long fronds. You're basically just feeding the grass at that point or other landscape material, and none of that's getting to your palm. The palm root system on most palms here are very small, every 3x3, 4x4 at tops. And as long as you're staying, I just use this gauge, but as long as you're within that range, those palms will take it. But an oak or a maple or a magnolia, something like that, obviously a different situation. But just know that when you fertilize, we push every quarter, 4 times a year. By doing that, you're reducing the peaks and valleys of the hunger to feed. You're better to feed more often, less quantity than one big hit every year. Your palm will thank you for that. Palms are always hungry. Very rarely, are you going to really overdose a palm tree without doing something really silly?
That's kind of because they share that similarity with grass.
Grasses, yep. They just take it. They take it. And No, if you were gonna like yours, I would just, yeah, I wouldn't fertilize anything. We put palm tablets. I can't think of the name of them now. They're palm tablets that we put in the holes when we plant these palms, and that gives it a good kick start. They're supposedly last a year, but you know how that goes. None of that, never seems to be. But definitely follow up. This fertilizer, don't quote me, but if you have palms, that's definitely good. When keep it dry, put it in a 5-gallon bucket with a lid, it'll last. So I just did some kind of cool things. Is this a problem? So you have a Sylvester palm here, not native. I'm just adding this to the mix. This goes for other palms as well, but you have this palm splitting going all the way up. That looks like some severe structural damage. You got this guy over here. This looks like the queen, like a base of a queen, or same thing where you got all this splitting. I get called out on the field for these, and believe it or not, this is completely normal. There's nothing wrong with these palms. You're going to find this in older palms. Sometimes you'll even find this more often if the water table is a little higher, the ground's a little wetter. Sometimes you'll see it where the roots kind of go up on the surface like that. But very, very common. So don't worry. Sometimes it's so yellow when it first cracks open, it looks like somebody just threw spaghetti at it. It looks really like, oh my gosh, I just spent all this money on this palm and it's growing not right. So this is very normal for this palm, or for these, if you have those symptoms. What's that? Palm scurf. This happens on. This is just a waxy substance on your new foliage. People get this confused a lot with mealybugs or some kind of small insect, or a T-scale or a cycad scale. But it's not. If you look closer and you really start rubbing and getting into it, you'll realize that it's just part of the sheath or part of the process when that first bud was pushed out. It will go away on older fronds. This is mainly, you'll see this a lot on your Robellinis, your pygmy dates, but and you'll see it on other fan palms as well. But it looks like a scale of some sort, or mealybugs, but you look closely, it's just a waxy substance. This is not a problem. This right here, I was in Citrus Hills driving back from the house, driving through Man of War, and there's a customer that has two big, I think they're just Washingtonians, and this section right here was about 5 foot off the ground, just splitting, and roots were like pouring out of it. Very, very normal. What causes it? I've tried to do some research. There's really no good answer. To me, if this was a regular, like an oak doing this, when I see suckers coming out, I think of stress, but they're not relating this to stress. But it's kind of a cool thing. Like I said, if you guys are driving down Man of War, it's on your right-hand side or left-hand side, you'll see two palms out in the front of this guy's yard, and you'll see it about 4 or 5 foot up, just roots going down to the ground. I've seen these here in Crystal River that you can stand on, and it's 2 or 3 foot tall from the base. Completely normal, no need to stress about it. Aesthetically, it looks kind of gross and ugly, but overall, for the palm structure and the overall health of the palm, no worries.
Like a beard.
Yeah, builds character. Builds character. So enough talking about like all of the bad stuff and shame on palms. There are some really good benefits. Palms are less likely to fall or blow down in high winds or a hurricane. Reason being is the overall structure of the palm. In high winds, you've got an oak tree and a palm tree. An oak tree has almost like a fan or a sail where it can just huge drag. It'll catch all that wind, huge amount of stress on the roots, and topple over. Whereas a palm tree just shears off, and it's almost like a pencil in the wind. There's no real drag. Plus, because the way it's designed, it flexes way more than like an oak would. So simply the branching on the palm, people say, oh, obviously you can't predict hurricane force winds, but in general, palms are going to be less likely to blow over. The roots are less likely also to damage the foundation or walkway. I've seen palms, massive palms, and a walkway going right to them, and the roots are actually growing over the concrete and not damaging the concrete. Could have never have done that with a 24-inch oak or something to that effect. It'd have been a disaster. Let's see. They're slow growing and they're fairly low maintenance. They give a great focal point and tropical look to the landscape. They do allow native birds and other native animals a place for refuge. It all depends on how you prune and trim them. Like we were talking about earlier, if you just let them go, especially the ground palmettos, all kinds of critters, you list them and they're all in there. As far as the taller trees, at the nursery, we got squirrels living in them. It'd be cool to have some bats living in them, but we don't. But you bats, all kinds of birds, and obviously the medicinal purpose and the pollinators. Like I said, Citrus Avenue, you can see those. If you guys aren't familiar, you can see those beehives. I don't know whose they are, but they'll have dozens of them over there on Citrus Ave, going down into Crystal River. And that's it, guys. What's that? Yeah, by the power lines. Yep. And that's it, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you. And if there's any questions, just hit me. Yes, ma'am.
I have a Washingtonian about 7 or 8 years old. My husband wants to cut the bottom fronds because they're kind of like sticking out and you can't walk around it. Is that okay or not?
The bottom fronds?
Yeah, the very bottom. There's nothing wrong with them. They're healthy.
Yeah.
But they're sticking out and getting like you can't walk around them.
Well, yeah. So those are gonna be those are gonna have they're really toothy. Those are some of the big. That's probably the second fastest growing palm too. But like I said, I would keep to a 90 degree trim line. But if you're trimming it because of a safety issue, then yeah, I would. Yeah, safety's first. You don't want to lose an ear. Walking under it. Yeah, for sure. Safety first. Yeah. Yes.
Are palms unique in that they will take the nutrients and good stuff out of a distressed frond, or is that just something that I thought I heard?
Yeah. So what you want to do is, as the on a palm frond, they will give nutrients down to the bitter end. So if you still have some kind of life to a frond, you're better off if you can tolerate the look to just trim off of what needs to be off the single frond itself, like the brown tips or whatever. But yeah, they said to keep them on there because they will give nutrients and energy to the end. Now, if they're dangling and there's not a green life to it, then yeah, yank it. It's not doing a whole lot for you. Yep.
What about lethal yellowing? You didn't mention, is that not here or is it prime?
That's lethal yellowing is down south. It's more like your Miami-Dade, to my knowledge. I don't think it's not up here. It's more south. That's going to be like your coconut palms and things like that. What's here a lot is the bronzing. Yeah. Now, people say, well, why would you even bring these palms to the nursery and sell them? I get that. I hear that. I kind of weigh out the options and the pros and cons, and they're still a good palm. I would still plant sables without any issue, without worrying about that until the case had come. But definitely I see it around, and it is a shame. It's sad, especially with homes that have these palms that have been there for decades and just lose the top. If you see one, I was talking with Donna, you see one, you can supposedly treat it. The chemical I was pulling up, it seems to be fairly common to pick up. This is a super long name, but to prevent as a treatment, but it's not a one and done. It's like baby in this, you got multiples on your property. That's a lot of stress to worry about. But yeah, it's a shame too, because I see it more so. I think I see it more so in the last couple of years than I have. You agree? I mean,
Well, it's been progressing up. It start out in Southwest Florida. But the thing to remember is that the leafhopper is alternate host to St. Augustine grass. You can don't have St. Augustine grass, keep it down, you won't have the leafhopper because that's spreading it.
Right.
So that's why you don't see so much in wild areas where there's no St. Augustine grass, but it's worse in cultivated areas where you've got, it's the same leafhopper, it spreads leafy yellow, by the way.
Right. Yeah. And with that, to branch off that, so when you have St. Augustine, normally St. Augustine's in a higher end community where the houses are stacked on top of each other. So literally 10 foot away could be another palm, another palm, another palm, and it can be transferred very quickly as well. Unfortunately, like even in the wild, I mean, to me, I think it's getting worse. Hopefully somebody smarter than me is coming up with a plan to eradicate or have some kind of natural or
What's going to happen is the same thing happened with yellow, and all the susceptible coconut palms died. They've had the Malaya-resistant ones, they're doing okay.
Right.
It's going to run through, it's going to kill most of the native palmettos, and the resistant ones will survive. And
hopefully that's the plan.
There's a resistant palmetto where it came from, Sable Mexicana, which doesn't get it at all. So.
Yeah, it's just it's just a shame, to have you're right in your backyard some good natives just going in and getting replaced with. But anyhow, any other questions, guys? I do appreciate it. I don't know if it went long or short, but if you want to come and get poked by the palms, that's great. If not, that's great too. But I do thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a place that's cards, you guys. Has everybody been to the nursery? Yeah. Everybody has? Okay. So you guys go to cards.
Okay, so that concludes the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you to the people online, and especially to the people who are coming back that are kind of new to the chapter. Welcome, and we're glad to have everybody here. All right, have a good night. Bye.
So then you're doing the what? I'm gonna go with, yeah, I'm gonna go with, I'm not able